Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with, well, VC Andrews again. You asked me to do a reacting here. Today we're actually back to the regular old versus new, so only two movies this time. And this time, it's the year without a Santa Claus. So yeah, basically Santa said, screw it, I'm taking the day off. But I'm guessing with that, world's going to hell. Or, I'm not sure how deep of a hell, but, well, might as well see what's going on here and see who saves the day. And see which of these versions are the best. Though, I guess, old, since I didn't even know there was a remake. And anywho, be sure to like, subscribe for more, hope you enjoy. Let's check it out.
My name is Hilda, I don't learn from my mistakes.
And I don't have a
But I will do my best no matter what it takes. It's usually my fault, but I try to make it right. And I do. Most of the time.
Hey guys, happy holidays from the VC English Critiquer. Oh man, that Hilda Season 3 was just awesome. Well, the first 7 episodes were just really good, but that series finale, oh, that is easily the best Hilda installment ever, especially the third act. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but you've got to see it yourselves. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. But with that said, there is still kind of a bittersweet notion in all of this, because as satisfying as the conclusion of the series was, it's just so crazy that Hilda's adventure is, well, finally over. It's probably the craziest lack of a supernatural entity since the year Santa Claus decided to retire. Twice, in fact. Did you ever hear of that terrible year in
Without
2006
Santa
and
Claus.
1974? When Santa Claus took a holiday
There's a
on
song.
the night before Christmas
This day.
morn.
Oof.
It was the year without a Santa Claus, 'cause he felt no one gave a crap
Ouch.
about him working his ass off throughout the year without a paycheck dropped in his lap.
Ouch.
With an existential crisis that was more painful than ISIS, not helped by his asshole doc. He felt no one cared for him, so he said less than grim, "This year let's screw that toy delivery talk."
Jeez.
But Mrs. Claus wouldn't hear of such, so she sent 2 loyal elves
One reindeer.
to scour the earth and find lots of worth in folks with much joy as themselves. So they searched all around in a city called Southtown and met this friendly kid who, while definitely Santa skeptical, agreed to help Santa find his id. And of course, snow always brings holiday spirit, but in this place it does not. Because the heat miser won't let his bro Snow Miser take away its climate of hot. But perhaps some compromise is where the solution lies. Maybe they can work this out. A little heat in the pool and snow for the gloomy souls to make them and Santa not pout. And such is the plot of Rankin Bass's adaptation of Phyllis
Rankin
McGivney's
Bass.
poem The Year Without a Santa Claus. What's interesting is, even though the title and the Miser Brothers' iconic song is remembered by the vast majority, the plot and characters itself are somewhat overlooked, at least by Rankin Bass standards. I mean, you don't often see Ignatius Thistlewhite featured in merchandise with the Yukon Cornelius, the Winter Warlock, or Frosty, or Jingle and Jangle in this depiction of Mrs. Claus, but it did have enough of a following to get a live-action TV remake in 2006, and a sequel in 2008 with Mickey Rooney and George Irving reprising their roles as Santa and Heat Miser. The reviews for neither were all that great, but I can't really act like the Rankin Bass version's mild obscurity is totally shocking either. So what do you say we compare it to the
Fair.
remake and find out if it's at least still a
sounds
better
fair.
movie compared to that pile of reindeer crap, or if the remake was actually a major improvement to the story that was wrongly biased as a bad live-action remake? Whether
Well,
you're
we're about
having
to
a
find
white
out.
or green Christmas, this is old versus
It's
new,
new,
the year without a Santa Claus.
Okay, before we move on, I think the reason that this story hasn't been told all that well is, or at least hasn't been known, is, well, I know it's Rankin Bass, the same guy that brought us, Rudolph and Santa Claus comes to town, this, yeah, you definitely don't see, like, okay, this feels like a made-up story, which, honestly, you can believe, because, wow. And, well, you could definitely see it, right? Just, it's not really based on, like, something, like, we all know, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or Santa Claus is coming to town. You know, that. I don't know, it's definitely something you don't, like, think about. It's just more like, I mean, it was alright, but considering, like, the rest, but, jeez. Yeah, it's definitely overshadowed by two of other Rankin Bass's, like, other stories. Like I said, Santa Claus Comes to Town and Rudolph, right? Can you blame him? No wonder this thing fell by the wayside. Kinda feel bad for Heatmeyer and Snowmeyer. Their debut, and, well, they are memorable, just bad movie, I guess. Well, anyway, let's see which version of The Year Without a Santa Claus wins out. Will it be the TV special or the Rankin Bass 1974 version? Shall we find out? Well, let's find out.
It's only fitting that we start this comparison by looking at what everyone remembers from this story, the Miser Brothers.
Here we
So,
go.
will Mr. White Christmas Snow, Icicle, and 10 Below, and Mr. Green Christmas Sun, Heat Blister, and 101 leave the bigger impact on our Christmas climate in wood or live action? Let's find out with Best Miser Brothers.
Here come the bros. Time for a little tag match. Let's go!
First of all, yes, I know I referred to these two as the villains in my Rudolph review, and for years I always assumed that they were, and the reason for why there was the threat of A Year Without a Santa Claus, you know, like maybe they kidnapped him or something. I mean, in my defense, don't these two just look like your typical Rankin Bass villains? But upon watching the special, I found that on the contrary, they're the ones who end up bringing him out of retirement. Ironic, isn't it? But okay, let's get right into them. Yeah, even though their screen time is fairly limited, these two living embodiments of cold and warm climates and sons of Mother Nature herself, no, not that one, are definitely what everyone remembers most from this special. Even those who haven't seen it are probably still familiar with these two characters and their classic song, Mr. White/Green Christmas. And they should, because it's a real toe tapper.
I'm Mr. White Christmas.
I'm Mr. White.
I'm Mr. Icicle. I'm Mr. Tenderloin.
And please know that this is the only song that the remake actually retains because, I mean, musical or not, you could not do another version of the story without this song.
True.
In all fairness, it's a pretty good rendition of it. But now let's talk about the duo themselves. Believe it or not, this one was actually a bit harder than I thought.
Really?
Dick Shawn and Michael McKean both really capture Snow Miser's smug, Paul Lynch-like narcissism, and George Irving and Harvey Fierstein do well as the super hot-blooded, over-the-top Heat Miser.
Cold-blooded, hot-headed.
They got away. They got away. They got away. They got away.
I honestly can't decide which delivery is funnier. And the way these squabbling brothers go up against each other is just a joy to watch in both movies, but there is one noticeable difference in their portrayals. Whereas the new, the two seem like they took pleasure in their rivalry with one another, the Miser brothers in the Rankin Bass film seemed a lot more hot-headed, pun intended, and honestly childish about it.
Hi there, Sugar Plum. How'd you make out with a hothead?
I heard that, you snowball.
Oh, my goodness. Speak of the devil. Mind your blood pressure, hotcakes. Mother warned you about that low boiling point of yours.
Damn.
You think you're hot stuff just because Mother likes you best.
Boy, not.
I told you he wouldn't cooperate.
Cooperate? Surrender the North Pole you call cooperate? Got a good mind to chill your embers for you.
Oh, yeah?
All right, enough of this.
The Miser brothers in the
Yeah, it
remake
sounds
were
about right.
immature too, don't get me wrong, but I saw more Malcolm and Reese like teenagers arguing with them. The Rankin Bass Miser brothers honestly felt like 4-year-old girls squabbling for the last piece of candy.
So?
And yeah, funny as both of those are, the more immature depictions are naturally bound to get more laughs from most.
Fair.
I think this is because when you call people childish names or pick on them in a gleeful manner, it doesn't make you look as immature because it feels more sarcastic.
Ouch.
The more feisty attitudes of the original Miser brothers made their childish fights more believable, so I just found them funnier to watch. Plus, I also liked how they seemed to have a closer bond with the Clauses. When Mrs. Claus asks Snow Miser to put a blizzard for her, he immediately asks her, where do you want it? You know, before finding out it's in the south and they gotta go to Heat Miser first. We never see the Clauses asking Snow Miser about this in the new, and while both Heat Misers had grudges against the Clauses for biasing with his brother, the Rankin Bass one did seem a little more open to doing them a favor than in the new. So all things considered, it seems that the Rankin Bass Miser brothers mastered the elements of fire and ice a little better metaphorically. Point goes to the Rankin Bass version.
Cooperate. The very thought makes the blood run cold in my veins. Yeah, well, it's enough to boil my brain cells.
Yeah, well, bye. Christmas without you.
What's really interesting about Rankin Bass is they always seem to create the most non-traditional Santas. Hell, the one their first review was a racist, belittling, smug asshole, and the one here is having an existential crisis. And of course, there's Mrs. Claus, who, in most of Rankin Bass's specials, is just in the background. But is that the case here? Let's find out with Best Clauses.
So let's see. So, went on for the old first so far. Here we go.
You'll note that this is not the first time either Mickey Rooney or John Goodman has played Santa. Rooney had voiced the character in Rankin Bass's origin story for the character. Its first one, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and we saw Goodman as Santa last year in my comparison of the two Rudolph movies. This is the first and only time Shirley Booth and Delta Burke have played Mrs. C, though. Anyway, unlike with the Miser brothers, this one wasn't hard. Mickey Rooney and Shirley Booth are both miles better as the Clauses. Look, I remember how well John Goodman played Santa in The Good Times Rudolph, but the idea is that Santa here is going through an existential crisis where he's borderline losing his desire to keep living.
Come on! What are you waiting for?
Not like that!
I said borderline losing
Yeah, borderline,
desire.
not actively.
Anyway, I didn't feel that John Goodman was particularly disheartened here. At worst, he just felt a little overworked, like we all do when we have a big job. Mickey Rooney, on the other hand, definitely felt more like someone who had lost his faith in humanity.
Nobody really cares anymore. And besides, the doctor says I'm really not up to snuff. Besides, I'm due for a holiday.
Like, compare how each one decides they're taking the year off. Rooney didn't necessarily seem like he wanted to do this, but saw no need in continuing what was the equivalent of a faithless marriage.
So basically,
hell, he even seemed a little disappointed when announcing to the elves he wasn't going on the sleigh ride this year. Goodman, on the other hand, seemed enraptured by the idea of binging on milk and cookies at home and letting the world's kids go without toys.
Damn.
Hell, at one point he even contemplates permanently hanging up his coat and going to a retirement center for supernatural beings. So this Santa ultimately feels more like a lazy punk than someone feeling worthless in this world. Now with that said, he's not completely uncaring. He is just as determined as the original to rescue the elf duo and Vixen when they land in trouble on Earth, especially when dealing with his asshole animal control keeper.
I remember you from when you were a little boy. You never made my list.
Whew.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for that BB gun, Santa.
You'll shoot your eye out.
Hey.
Hey, at least he didn't knock him down a slide with his foot. But there is one more small nitpick I have with him, and that's while the original knew better than to flat out reveal his identity, especially to adults, this Santa is 100% blunt about looking for elves and flying reindeer and being centuries old. With elves, it's a little more understandable, but with the wise and all-knowing mascot of Christmas, after him, of course, seems a little odd. But again, that's not a huge deal in the long run. Oh, but you think he's got it bad? That's nothing compared to his wife. Mrs. Claus in the original was determined to make sure the world's kids got the presents they deserved, even considering doing the job herself at one point. I guess she realized that, like the Warner siblings, she's...
Yeah, under the watch of the NSA.
Anyway, in Rankin Bass, she's the one who sends Jingle and Jangle on their quest for Christmas spirit, and who tries to persuade the Miser brothers to compromise to allow the snowstorm Southtown needs for Christmas spirit. But in the NBC version, she does virtually nothing. She doesn't send the elves on their mission, they just go on their own, and Santa's the one who talks to the brothers, not her. I'll go more to this with the best story around, but isn't that kind of counterintuitive? The whole reason for visiting the duo was ultimately to lift his spirits, so having the guy who needs saving...
Going out there?
Yeah, again, counterintuitive,
weird.
isn't it? And on top of that, Shirley Booth is so much more charming in her role. She's kind and loving like you'd expect Mrs. Claus to be, but also has a lot of spunk and moxie, and is not afraid to be blunt if it's deserved.
Here he comes now, the big ham. I hate to do this to you boys, but you leave me no choice. I'm going over your heads.
You're kidding.
You wouldn't dare.
I
would.
would, and I will.
I guess Delta Burke does fine at capturing the sweet, joyful nature of Mrs. Claus, but she was honestly so irrelevant
just
here.
like,
I almost forget she's in the movie. Oh well, at least conservatives who think wokeness is destroying the quality of Hollywood will be happy with this. So yeah, love
Fair.
you, John Goodman, and I'm sure you're a nice lady, Delta Burke, even if I never
Sorry,
heard of
dude.
you.
No
But I
dice.
mean, who could better capture someone feeling as
Dude.
small as a tiny little speck about the size of Mickey Rooney than Mickey Rooney himself? And with Shirley Booth as a more spunky,
Yep.
memorable Mrs. Claus, Rankin Bass takes another point here.
That's
Point goes to the Rankin Bass version.
I don't fit in anymore.
Yeah, well, too bad. Yeah, honestly, the whole, like, Santa having to go talk to the bros himself. Honestly, yeah. You think a guy that's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, why would he go there and ask for the blizzard? Like, I have to agree. The old one is definitely more, like, in line of, like, the premise of, like, the year without a Santa, right? Because if you expect Santa to just say, I'm done. Screw you guys. And just chill back at home, you expect him to be bed for most of the film. Until, you know, spirit's up and he's out. Makes sense, but it does make sense. Sorry, just I was about to counter, but I got nothing. And yeah, like he said, Miss Claus did a lot more, because this was definitely her time to shine here, since, you know, Santa's out, so who better to lift the spirits than his own wife, right? So it makes sense. So, anyway, moving along. See who's next. So I'm guessing we're going to the kid next, or...
What's a family film without a bumbly comic relief duo? And ours is their
Oh,
special mention,
Jingle
as
Jangle.
they're the ones who actually go on the expedition for the long-lost Christmas spirit in this story. So, who made for the better explorers and comic relief bringers? Let's find out with Best Elf Duo.
Let's see which odd couple wins it. In this case, yeah. Let's see. I think the newer...
Jingle and Jangle are the two elves who go on the quest for Christmas spirit, the bubbling idiot duo, and more or less the protagonists of the story. Even if they are a few Christmas lights short on brightness, they do have an undying loyalty to the Clauses and Christmas, and want to do everything they can to keep this from being the year without a Santa Claus. Now, I bet some of you are curious about what the outcome will be. You may remember how while the Rankin Bass Rudolph did win, it wasn't by a landslide, and
True.
it's not going to be a
3-2.
landslide win for Rankin Bass here either.
Oh?
Again, I'm sorry to destroy some of your childhoods by saying this, but I just don't think the original Jingle and Jangle are that great of characters.
Really?
I mean, they aren't annoying or anything. Not too much, anyway.
Wow.
But they're supposed to be the comic reliefs, and I just don't think their dialogue or antics were especially memorable.
Riding what do you call that thing anyway?
That's Vixen.
Riding a vixen the wrong way on a one-way street and wearing funny-looking suits on a Sunday.
But
Tell it to the judge.
maybe they don't like reindeer in these parts.
Must be scared to death.
I'm scared to death.
Serves you right. Bark for the Lady Rover, indeed.
I mean, their
Yeah,
jokes
no.
are cute, sure, but I just didn't find myself laughing that hard to them. And yes,
Yeah,
their
they're just, like,
performances are
eh.
pretty goofy, but compare them to other elves from Rankin Bass Christmas specials.
Practice.
You don't like to make toys?
No.
Why weren't
There you
you
go.
at elf practice?
Ooh, wiggle my ears and tickle my toes. Methinks I see a baby's nose. It's more than a nose. There's a whole baby attached to it.
Yeah, wee bit of a step down. The duo in the remake, played by Eddie Griffin and Ethan Suplee, actually are a bit more developed in this version, namely how they want to see the world outside the North Pole, mostly because of its pop culture. Hell, what motivates Jangle to go on the
Radio
quest for
show?
Christmas spirit is watching a female Dr. Phil knockoff on TV.
Dr. Laura.
But come on, forced pop culture references couldn't possibly be better than what the original offers us, could they? Well, they could if they're funny, and I have to admit, I do remember a lot more lines from these two than the Rankin Bass film, pop culture or not.
Makes me miss my mother and father.
They live right next door to you.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Always wondered who those black people were next door.
What makes you think we're gonna find them here?
Because this is a school. This is where kids hang out all day. You never seen South Park?
South Park.
How long do they keep them here?
About 7 hours.
Really? What are they paying for going to school?
Nothing. Not a dime.
Well, no wonder there's no Christmas spirit.
But I only believe in things I can see and touch.
Really? Can you see a sunset, touch a puppy?
Yeah, I can see a sunset and touch a puppy.
Bad example.
Yeah, you think?
There are a couple of ETs that came phone home.
ETs?
Elf types.
See, pop culture references can
Nice.
work if they're executed the right way.
Hey, look.
On top
Even
of
the
that,
old version.
while these two are
Whoa.
still pretty dumb, they are a little more effective at their job than in the original. Like, the reason they're wearing those radical dude clothes is to not be conspicuous and blend in with the civilians.
Makes sense.
Though that still doesn't explain why they're so verbally blunt about being elves with everyone they come across. And while the original
I mean,
two
you can't
failed
hide the ears,
miserably at
so might as well.
convincing Iggy they were elves, these ones actually do succeed by showing him Vixen can fly. Only it takes them quite a bit of time to think of that. Well, better late than never, I guess.
True.
The original two did have the advantage that they actually partake in the iconic Miser Brothers scene, whereas the NBC versions do not. But overall, I just feel these two were better at their jobs of resurrecting Christmas spirit and being comic reliefs. So, as much
Makes
as I need
sense.
to remember that Rankin
Sorry,
Bass
Bass.
wasn't 100% flawless, I do have to give NBC a Christmas
There you go,
present with
NBC.
this
You got yourself a point.
Point goes the NBC version.
Yep.
Is he
2-1-4.
serious? Boy, it's worse than I thought.
Yeah, well, too bad.
It's gonna be a merry, merry Christmas.
Someone forgot to put the notification out.
But of course, Mrs. Claus, Jingle and Jangle, and the Miser Brothers couldn't restore Santa's faith in humanity all by themselves.
Yep.
Just
Here comes the
95% of it. So let's see who contributed to the remaining 5% better with Best Supporting Cast.
Go. Best bit to pull out here? That's it.
Rankin Bass, creators and the most beloved side characters in holiday media, especially in their first film, Rudolph. Unfortunately, that
Not
cannot be
here?
said for this film
Oof.
in either version.
Wah,
Yeah,
wah.
I'm sorry, but neither film has that great of a supporting cast. With the exception of Ignatius Thistlewhite, or Iggy for short, the side characters do virtually nothing to further the story, and I honestly think that's a part of why the special isn't as popular as most other Rankin Bass works. The side
True.
characters are a big part of what makes their works Christmas time staples. Was it because most of them are townsfolk, so you didn't think toys of them would be marketable, so you didn't bother giving them much personality? You know, a great character doesn't necessarily have to have merchandise. I'm sure just about any business executive would disagree with my notion, but I still
Yeah,
stand
to each
by
their own,
that.
as they say.
Well, I guess we'll have to make the best of what we got, and I actually think that the remake has the slight advantage with
Again?
the supporting cast.
Huh.
Even if they
Look
don't
at
do
that.
any more to advance the story, they do at least have a little more personality. Well, at least most of them do. The elf doctor who plays a large part in Santa's retirement decision is much nastier in the Rankin Bass version, almost feeling like he wants to drive the old man to suicide.
Nobody cares about Christmas anymore.
They don't?
Of course not. Wouldn't surprise me none if nobody even believes in you anymore.
Now, Santa, don't you pay him any mind.
Nobody cares a hoot and holler, for you are Christmas. Oh, by the way, Merry Christmas to you.
The NBC one is pretty run-of-the-mill.
How was he not
But
fired?
Okay, what is the personality that NBC gives the side characters in this version? Mostly cliches, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, Iggy's dad and the mayor are combined into one character in this version, which leads to a dad's too busy for kid cliche, and this leads to his mom becoming the daddy loves you, he's just super busy right now mom cliche. I know it's been overdone, but in the original, neither the parents nor the mayor had any personality at all, so it's still better than nothing. Well,
True.
save for a fairly sweet song about the dad having a nostalgic trip back to his memories of Santa. Plus, while the side characters in the remake don't really forward the plot much more in this version, they do still make for some fun gags.
Using the Bosworth box, create a production possibility graph displaying how Christmas affects the economy. Answer the question. Do you think this Christmas will be more or less profitable than last year's?
I think I just saw a flying reindeer.
That just earned you an extra homework assignment. Write an essay explaining why it is aerodynamically impossible for a reindeer to fly.
Shouldn't this be high school, not a kid?
You're on the job, eh?
Not good.
Is that mustard?
You two have permission to be here? Hey, stranger danger! Stranger danger!
You're a Greek goddess, aren't you?
Isn't that a salad dressing?
Shut up.
Tried to hide my radiance under these sporty ensembles, but sometimes it just shines through.
Tonak's so surprised by that last scene. I don't know if strange men approaching kids at school, kids giving them their names, or their parents inviting them into their homes was acceptable in the 1920s, but definitely not in 2006.
Or nowadays.
That's why Iggy has to keep the North Pole visitors a secret from his family in this version. And these lines don't help their case much.
I guess we'll have to keep hammering away at Iggy until he sees the magic of Christmas is real. Trying to make booty calls on the clock. There's too much booty.
This version also has a subplot
please,
where
where are you?
Santa's lost in Christmas spirit. This due to his workshop getting a corporate makeover to stay trendy and suck up to the
Totally
market.
Santa?
That
Really?
makes them a grand total of $0.00. Well, that's beside the point, and the main culprit for this is a hotshot corporate elf named Sparky, who even wants to go as far as have Christmas not just be on the 25th. Because, yeah, we know how well that always goes in
nope,
media.
bad idea.
And even insists on doing the job himself in the third act, since apparently the North Pole laws dictate that the CEO has the right to determine who goes on the Christmas ride in Santa's absence.
That would be me.
He gets thwarted pretty quickly, but it does give the story kind of a villain, so kudos for that. And I'm just going to say
it makes
while
sense.
the original had the better Miser Brothers, Mother Nature herself is so much more funny in the remake, basically being this cold-blooded Swedish Jennifer Tilly.
And I didn't see anything.
Do not lie to Mother Nature. It makes her ever so sour.
Jingle and jangle, they mean well, but well, they're like children.
I know all about idiot children. I have some manure that needs manipulating. So unless you two boys want the job, behave!
Oh!
And last, but certainly not least, let's talk about
Alright,
Iggy. Sure, he's a bit more cocky about not believing the duo are elves than he should have, but once he learns the truth, he does prove himself to be a pretty caring kid. But based on the trend here, I think I'll give a slight edge to NBC. He's presented like a corporate child prodigy who was apparently able to organize the Southtown Winter Festival largely by himself. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, Iggy.
And this does fit his role as a grown-up kid who's adamant about not believing in Santa more.
So
But
basically a
they
kid
just give him
forced
so
to grow
much
up.
more to do. We see him interacting with Jingle and Jangle a lot more, and he's actually the one who persuades the animal control person to let Vixen go without them paying the fine, mostly using his mayor's kid charismatic smooth talking.
Iggy, you're a genius.
How'd you do it? Politics is the art of the possible. But when that guy finds out he's not really invited to Christmas dinner...
Don't worry about it. It'll all be worth it.
The one in the original is pretty good
Nice.
too, don't get me wrong. Like, it was sweet how he decided he didn't need physical proof to believe in Santa if his parents could, and he actually goes with Mrs. Claus on the visit to the Miser Brothers. But then again, he was really just there and said so.
Yeah, nothing.
Now in the next round, I'll talk about one big difference with the original Iggy that greatly impacted the story. But since the new Iggy contributed to the story throughout, I do think I have to give him and the remake supporting cast this point.
Yep.
Point goes to
Don't tie it up here.
NBC version.
Why should I be upset? Yeah, what's the big deal?
By the way, is that the voice for Kieran from Frosty the Snowman? Let me know in the comments.
Could be.
It's gonna be a merry, merry Christmas. A merry, merry Christmas.
One more to
Now
go.
that the score's all tied up, there's really no point in doing a best story round because
Really?
most of the differences with the two stories I've already talked about with the character rounds. The only thing I really have left to talk about is the ending. Which film saw that there was no year without a Santa Claus in a more triumphant way? Let's find out with
Here we go,
Best
best
Ending
story.
for the win.
Here we go. See who made it work. Go!
So I bet a lot of you are really curious about what the outcome's going to be.
Let me guess,
When I watched
Santa
these movies for
gets-
the first time, I naturally assumed the original would be a moving holiday classic on par with Rudolph that I had the misfortune of not growing up with. And
Yeah?
the remake would just be another one of those shallow cash grab live action remakes that's become a staple with Disney today. But I found neither of those were the case, as I didn't think either film was really awesome or terrible. Again, I think what kept this particular work from being more higher ranked was its underwhelming supporting cast. As great as the Miser Brothers and Clauses were, they ironically have less screen time
hold
than
up.
most of the side characters, so this kept the special from being among Rankin Bass's most charming works. The remake may have had weaker portrayals of the most iconic characters, but since it did give the side characters who have the majority of screen
that seems
time a
like the
slight
trend
upgrade,
for, like,
that
older,
does give
newer
it a
films.
slight advantage in that field. So does that mean it's a tie? Nope.
Let's find
Because
out.
there's still the ending to take into consideration, which are fairly different each film, but still aim for an
Really?
emotional vibe, and Rankin Bass's is 100 times more effective. How so? Well, in
yeah.
the remake, what ultimately brings Santa out of retirement is seeing how Iggy is still optimistic even without his dad who never has time for him. So he figures, if this kid can be positive, so can I. So what about the whole make it snow in Southtown to show them there's still Christmas spirit? Here Santa only does it because Iggy wanted it for Christmas, and when it does, and his dad comes home and sees how happy they all are, he makes the usual family's more important, I resign as mayor speech we've seen all the time in media. We get a montage of them bonding at home, and after Sparky is put in his place at the pole, we actually see the impact of Heat Miser making the pole warm for a day. Yeah, you kind of see the problems here. Santa books up way too quickly and over a relatively trivial thing, and the
really
whole
good
big
build-up at the
snowstorm
end.
conflict feels pretty undermined since it's not done to lift his spirit. I wouldn't have necessarily minded the whole family means more to me speech cliche, how they kept it alongside the original film's ending, but we've seen it in media way too many times to count,
Makes
so
sense.
on its own, it doesn't do much for me. I did like how we saw the impact of the heated North
Arriba.
Pole, though. Anyway, now let's look at the original film's ending. So the snow comes, spirits come to Southtown, and now the general public accepts that Santa Claus is real. Yeah, one thing that confused me is, even though both films seem set in universes where Santa exists but is still acknowledged by the general public as just a fairy tale, yet they still don't question where the presents they don't buy for their kids under the tree come from, the
Can't blame 'em.
newspapers at the beginning freaking announced Santa's retirement. Hell, Iggy literally says 1 minute that he's heard about Santa retiring in the papers, and the next says he doesn't believe in him. The remake is a bit more consistent by dropping the whole news announcements of Santa's retirement, and when Iggy's parents claim they still believe in Santa Claus, it's more like a, he's real in a different sort of way, just like love is. You know, kind of like how most parents try to break it to their kids that, well, anyway, my point is that everyone now believes in Santa and have decided to bring him Christmas presents for a change this year. And Santa does agree that he was wrong and the world really does love him after all. Enough to let him take the year off from delivering gifts. But even though it seems like Mrs. Claus's efforts were all for nothing, Iggy and all of the world's kids still make good on their promise to give Christmas presents to Santa this year, or cards if they don't have enough money. And one card contains a cover of an Elvis Presley song that, with Rankin Bass's Pixar-level talent at making emotional and moving scenes, opens his eyes to just how really important he is to children.
Christmas without you.
I still think Frosty melting is the most emotional Rankin Bass scene ever, but this honestly is a close second. The kid seeing this completely makes you believe her devastation about Santa not coming this Christmas, and the cute composite shots of the puppet and the kid's drawings add some corny charm that overall lead to a really sweet and heartfelt, but also very emotional moment that honestly deserves a lot more pop culture references than it currently has. Now, doesn't that seem like a much more engaging way to help Santa see the light? So naturally, I was pretty disappointed that the remake chose to completely forgo this ending and just rely on an overdone cliche for its big heartfelt moment. And again, if it had this ending on top of it, it wouldn't have been such a big deal, but on its own, yeah, I've seen this way too many times to feel any emotion. But the bigger question is, why did they change it to begin with? Did they think it'd be too corny for the general public to decide they believe in Santa Claus in a live-action film? It seemed to work fine in Will Ferrell's Elf. But you know what my biggest takeaway was? A lot of people think it's wrong to lie to children about Santa, but this scene helped me realize that, real or not, Santa really is a big part of children's Christmas. It's sweet to think that someone actually is willing to spend a whole year making presents for kids for no money whatsoever. I think this motivates a lot of kids to be more thoughtful around this time of year to each other, just like Santa is to them. I tell ya, Rankin Bass is just so ingenious about sneaking messages for the parents in its specials. So overall, I did enjoy both movies alright, and while I don't think either will leave nearly as big of an impact as Rudolph, they're both still pretty fun stories in their own ways. But the ending of the Rankin Bass film is what ultimately made me realize why it became the holiday classic. Because without the concept of Santa for kids, they'll definitely have
the year.
Point goes to the Rankin Bass version, the ultimately more satisfying prevention of a year without a Santa Claus.
What am I, chop suey?
Maybe not chop suey, but, well, you know. There's more. Oh, sorry. Just have to double check. Literally, sorry. I'll talk later.
And that's all I got for the Year Without a Santa Claus. Now, I know that some of you guys were expecting a collaboration between Murray and I after this video, but it's been slightly delayed because I simply have to do a video analyzing the even better than Disney Renaissance awesomeness of Hilda Season 3. But I won't deprive you guys of the tradition we have of playing my all-time favorite Hilda song when I make an announcement of said collaboration.
3, 2, 1.
True, exotic or nautical, find my aquatic dramatics are second to none. I'll give you everything if you just give me your applause. You're in luck, 'cause you're
This is actually pretty good.
Gotcha! That's my new favorite Hilda song. Come on, guys, did you really think I would risk Murray sending those Teletubbies after me? Well, see ya then, guys, and have a Merry Christmas.
You too. Honestly, I'm not sure if I would have sent them if he did, but I gotta admit, that's actually a pretty good song. It actually had a pretty catchy vibe. It was like, dude, no. Oh. And I gotta admit, not bad. So, there you go. The Year Without a Santa Claus with the Rankin Bass version winning. Which honestly makes sense. What about you guys? Agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. Till next time, like, subscribe for more. Adios.